Alright, in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about some important dudes in chemistry. Unfortunately, they are all dudes just because in the past, men were the only ones who got credit for doing any science, even though there were probably a lot of women involved. So I'll just mention some very important players that will kind of come back as we're going through the semester and learning about a little bit more in detail about different parts of chemistry. So really the first person who's credited with trying to sort of start to define the world around him was Aristotle, and he was a philosopher. They're called great thinkers, and they really just wanted to understand everything about the world around them and sort of start to explain it. So this is about the 4th century BC in Greece, and what he proposed is that there were only 4 elements: earth, water, air, and fire, which we now know is not true. And he thought that all matter was perpetually divisible, so you could keep cutting it in half and keep cutting it in half and keep cutting it in half, and you would never get to the smallest part. Then Democritus, at the same time, again, another Greek philosopher, right around the same time, he is the person who came up with the first atomic theory, and he said that he thought that matter did have a smallest piece, and that smallest piece was called an atom, and an atom was indivisible. So this was the very first atomic theory, and then it was a very long time before we actually learned what an atom was. Now, in between then, for hundreds and hundreds of years, even thousands of years, there was a field called alchemy. And this field was all over the world. So China, India, Europe, Asia, Egypt, there was all these people that called themselves alchemists. And the whole idea of an alchemist was somebody who wanted to take a common metal and change it into gold. Okay, and if they were able to do this, obviously gold was a very valuable substance, and therefore if they were able to do this, then they would be, unlimitedly, they have limitless wealth, right? So, although alchemy isn't really, can't really happen, and it's sort of this mystical science, it did do a lot of really good things for chemistry, because by trying to, change a metal into gold, they developed all this different lab equipment and studied all these different processes. They developed medicines. So there's a lot of good that came out of what is sort of like a false religious science. And then in the 1500s, we've got to give Galileo his credit, because we call him the father of scientific method. Along with another person, Francis Bacon, they sort of came up this structured way of studying science, based on observation and experimentation. Then in the 1700s, Antoine Lavoisier, he is considered to be the father of chemistry. So he designed a lot of equipment, chemical equipment. He discovered some elements, nitrogen. He discovered the law of conservation of mass, which is that when something undergoes a chemical reaction, mass is always conserved. So mass is neither created nor destroyed. It only changes forms. Okay. Now, the other thing that was really cool about him is that he kind of took science away from being observation, which is what Galileo came up with, where you observe and then you test, to sort of a more quantitative science. It's something that was based on measurement, using instruments to accurately measure things and, compare things, rather than having it be more subjective or qualitative sort of observation. Around the same time, John Dalton came up with his atomic theory, and he defined what an atom was. So again, way back when, we had Democritus, who had the idea of an atom, but it wasn't until the 1700s that John Dalton proposed this atomic theory that there's all these different elements, and they are made up of atoms. All their atoms are similar, but they are different based on what type of element you are, but they're all made up of the same fundamental building block. Now, Amadeo Avogadro, again around the same time, late 1700s, early 1800s, he is a very important person. He discovered what a mole was, or defined what a mole was, and we'll learn all about what moles are when we get into, mid-semester, when we get into our units. A mole is a quantity of a substance, and he defined it as 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd particles are in a mole. And this is Avogadro's number. And again, we'll come back and we'll talk. That will make more sense to you as we go on in the semester. We actually learn about moles and how they relate to chemistry and chemical compounds. And then finally, we want to give credit to Dmitri Mendeleev. He was a Russian in the mid-1800s to late 1800s. He came up with the first periodic table. So he arranged elements in a table, and he did it based on their chemical properties, but also their mass. And by doing this, by arranging them, he was able to, find holes in the periodic table where there were elements that maybe we had not yet discovered. So Mendeleev is given credit for the first periodic table. Okay, so these are just some important folks that made huge contributions to chemistry, and as we go on throughout the semester, we'll bring them up again, and we'll talk about other scientists that played important roles as well.